Welcome to Fintech Daydreaming, the podcast that dives into the world of banking technologies and the ever-changing landscape of fintech companies. We bring you real-life examples from global and local thought leaders, as well as experts working within the financial industry, and seek out the best stories from the front lines of financial services innovation, where dreams of industry pioneers meet reality. Hosted by Krogdahl and Ville Sointu. This is Fintech Daydreaming.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Daydreaming. My name is Ville Sointu and I'm joined by, as always, by my co-host, Paul Krogdahl. Paul, how is life with you today?
I think life is, as it always is. It's good. Can't complain. Still alive. Happy. Children are not sick. And the spring is just around the corner. Although we had another downpour of snow, right? So
yeah, I mean, that's a typical Finnish spring, right? So
yes.
You get not too much snow, I guess, also in the summer, but that's an old joke we have here in the Nordics.
And I read in the news, I read in the news, it said it's going to be a cold summer this year. So I think I'm getting ready to move to Spain. Sorry.
Yeah, and then once you're there, you realize it's too hot, right?
Yes.
But you're never going to get everything now, are you? But I think I still prefer the Spain idea, looking at all the snow outside in April. But yeah, it's a bit of a sad story actually on my side, because I mean, the last episode we did it live in the Fintech Summit in Helsinki, and that was absolutely fantastic. But almost like as an ironic twist to the whole thing, of course, despite having 3 jabs, I got the COVID right after that. So I've been a little bit down now 2 weeks, but today is a good day, and I think I should be able to manage hosting the episode today. But just in case I do get a coughing seizure or something, Paul, you will of course take over as my co-pilot here. That's right.
Always your wingman, Ville. Always your wingman. Don't worry.
Perfect. Excellent. But hey, enough about us and us complaining about our sicknesses. And I think we need to move on to the episode and our guest today. So we are joined today for the second time in a row, actually, because we also met this person in the Fintech Summit briefly. But he was such a fantastic guest on the last episode. We decided we want to have a longer talk with Jaakko. So our guest today is Jaakko Vilen from nCino. So Jaakko, how are you today, and how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Well, it's nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me again, even though you heard me already once. And I'm past COVID. I had mine already a month ago. So I've been following your episodes. That it's sort of like a nice Netflix series. That okay, which one of you has it this week, and how does it go? So it's an interesting plot that you have.
Yeah, that's a good point. We want to build this kind of dramatic sequence of events, and it's a series you absolutely have to keep on watching. And by the way, Jaakko, you are really the first guest ever on Fintech Daydreaming for 2 consecutive episodes. So congratulations, you just made the history books of our podcast.
Wow, I'm happy. I'm honored.
All right. So for the viewers and listeners who might not have seen the last episode and your brief intro there, maybe give a bit of a brief intro of yourself, your background, and how you ended up where you are today.
Brief intro about myself. So how many hours we have? I was born 41 years ago in Helsinki, and
maybe
okay,
not that far.
Faster. I started working in the banking IT in 2002. 2004. 2004. I'm old enough to start forgetting numbers now. No, 2004, and I've been working in the e-banking space, working as a NetBank developer, also project manager, and then in various pre-sales roles, team leading roles, but mostly in sales for a bit over a decade now. I also work for a while for Salesforce, and at Salesforce I got to learn about the Salesforce ecosystem. And a bit over 2 years ago, when nCino was looking for a first on-site person to Nordics, I thought that, okay, that would be something for me. So that's me. Soon 2 years at nCino as the first Nordic employee.
Great. I mean, we're going to get to nCino in just a while, but I mean, due to your extensive background, and you've been in fintech for almost as long as I have, by the way, so congratulations for lasting this long. But since you have this extensive background, and I know you, Jaakko, and you have a lot of great stories, we're going to do a bit of a different approach today, and we're going to cover nCino in the end, but we're going to have a broader discussion about other interesting topics in the fintech space to start with. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about, and Paul, welcome to join the conversation here as well, is one of the things that seems to be on top of the agenda for, well, most of the days of my work, at least these days, and that is ESG. So the environmental topics inside the fintech and financial sector is a very high priority topic today for multiple reasons, of course, and all of them quite good, I would say, and it's actually a quite rewarding job to do on a day-to-day basis, because you get to work on things that you feel are actually making a difference and are obviously important. But Jaakko, I mean, you've been around as well for a long time, like we just established. Do you think now, I mean, considering that the green values themselves have been around for a long time in the public discussions, do you think this current trend of ESG is something to be taken more seriously than before? Is this a different wave that we're seeing right now, or is it all just greenwashing, to take the cynical approach to this topic? What do you think?
Excellent opener and perfect to start on the sustainability topics. First of all, as a technology enthusiast, I'm not a proper geek, but technology enthusiast for sure. I have firm belief that actually the human society and the world is evolving year after year. Like similar if you draw a funny comparison with sort of developing code or developing programs, software, that each year it's somehow a little bit smarter than the years before, and that's actually my belief, that the stuff that we do and are able to do for sustainability topics, well, ESG as a specific example, is something that it's much more smarter than what we can do today than what was done before. And I think today there's, as a concrete example, there's much more data for investing into sustainable topics. So impact finance, as an example, that are you as an investor spending your money on something that is developing something a little bit better for the world, or are you just looking for your largest profits on short term? And now also with the geopolitical situation, I think that these type of topics, they are inevitable. You just need to be able to sort of perceive them also on the risk perspective as well. That are you still willing to support something that is destroying the nature or destroying something in the society?
So I need to be on the side of our listeners again here, right? We yet again have jumped straight into acronyms and everything else, and assume that all of our fantastic listeners are completely up and understanding of ESG. So let's reset the starting point here a little bit, and maybe Jaakko, do you want to explain for our listeners what is ESG? What do we mean by ESG, and you know, what are we talking about?
Yes, and I'm good at explaining things that are in layman's terms, because I'm not an academic professor myself. That's not my nature. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governmental items or government, and it is an acronym used very much by the financial industry, by banking industry especially. So for example, United Nations, they have a little bit different acronym, but you could say that it means the same. And ESG is now a hot topic in European Union as well. EU is developing their so-called taxonomy, and that taxonomy is actually an interesting thing that in my opinion, EU has the special skill to make anything exciting sound as boring as you can make it. And EU taxonomy sounds so bureaucratic that some lawyers in Brussels or wherever they are just doing some paperwork. But in reality, it is that they are defining that what are the concrete metrics, and from concrete metrics you can get to concrete data, and with data you can actually lead, like I was talking about, financing, for example, or supporting. Should the governments, for example, give grants to new projects if they are good or if they are bad, so to say.
So there's been this. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
And about the greenwashing that Ville dropped there in the first question, I missed to answer that. Yes, there's obviously a lot of greenwashing. There always will be a lot of greenwashing. You know, that's how the world works. That the politicians, the corporates, they must make themselves look good. But the more and more data you have, it's democratizing things, because it's making it more transparent as well. So what I mentioned about the impact finance is a good example that it's not only measuring that what is your company's carbon dioxide emissions, but it's measuring like, okay, if we invest into this project, what is the current level compared to 5 years from now? And then if you have your own investment into that, you're funding that, you are actually supporting that change for the better, or should it be other way around for the CO2 emissions? But nevertheless, I think you got the point that are we supporting something that is changing for the better, or are we just looking at status quo that somebody's, well, showing some good numbers that, hey, we are the good guys?
But you bring up a really interesting point, which is that what we're seeing today, especially in the sustainable investment space, is that the ESG-friendly products that we invest in tend to have higher costs and lower profits than maybe the ones that are not as sustainable as these products. But we have more data. Do you think there's a future where these sustainable investment products could actually be as profitable or even more profitable than the non-sustainable ones?
I believe, like I started, I'm a believer that I think the technology is evolving all the time, and maybe I'm allowed to give a short sort of example compared to what nCino started as, that it is for the SME lending, and classically in the banking industry, it's the SME, small and medium enterprises that are left alone, so to say, because the big corporates, you always get your money back by serving them. You get big deals, and the smallest ones you can automate that, or retail customers. But then it's the SMEs that you need to treat them like company customers, and that's a lot of labor. So when there's data, when there's technology that supports you automating that or making it more efficient, then it starts to work. So my comparison to the SME lending and to the sustainability topic is there, that the technology will help it.
Yeah. And by the way, we do have a pattern in our podcast, and our listeners know this. We always go to the deep end first, and then we pedal back ever so slowly to explain what we're talking about. So it's at least very consistent on our behalf when we do these conversations. But I appreciate the point, Paul, bringing us back a little bit on all the acronyms which we tend to love in this sector. So, Paul, did you have something you wanted to add to the ESG part before we move on?
No, I was actually, as you were talking through the data and the importance of the data and the ability to, manage the loan process for SMEs. I actually think this is one of the places where Amazon, with Amazon's ecosystem and Amazon's, support of SMEs, have actually been very strong. And again, like you said, because of the data, they've been able to reduce their risk and manage the SME lending process very well.
It's a fair point, and I'm not an expert on how Amazon has done it, so I'll keep from commenting this time.
Yeah, well, we need to get somebody from Amazon, I guess, to kind of break it down for us someday. Someday we will find somebody from Amazon to do that for us and our listeners, of course. But we, of course, did forget one thing in the beginning, and it is maybe my COVID that is affecting my memory here. But we always do a joke in the beginning of the podcast or in the end of the podcast, and we ask our guests to do the joke this season, or we've been doing that for a while now. So Jaakko, sorry to be a little bit out of sync here in terms of the series of events, but would you have a joke for our listeners at this point in time in the conversation?
I have a story, and I think it's a funny story, okay. But I'll let you to judge it. It comes from the company name nCino. So it is a funny name, and it is spelled in funny way that it's lowercase n and capital C and so forth. So shortly about the background to that nCino, if you write it with an E at the end, it's Spanish, and it means an oak. And actually the company itself and the software was originally developed at a bank called Live Oak Bank. And live oak is an oak that never drops their leaves, so it's evergreen. And so nCino is sort of like a loose translation, but then change the letters. And here comes the story. So first, when nCino as a company was founded, it wasn't called nCino. But the company and the software was called Bankr. So Bankr, Bankr. I don't know how to pronounce that properly in my Finnish rally English, but Bankr. And they were looking very eagerly for their first clients. And at that time, it was max 6 guys on the team, on the company. And one of their first sort of hot prospects, so to say, they were about to close the deal with one of the largest credit unions in US. And I had to actually do a little bit background research that what is credit union and how does that compare to a bank. So credit unions in US, they are like cooperatives owned by the members. Owned by the clients, and then they are not for profit as well, and they can have lower fees than the banks, and then sort of there seems to be this sort of like mutual hate against each other. So obviously you can imagine that people are proud of their own industry and what they do. So actually this lady, the CEO of this large credit union, she was commenting that hey guys, I really like your software and I think I'm going to buy it, but you have to change the name of your company. And they were like, oh no, why, what? And because they had coded all the URLs to Salesforce that it was Bankr everywhere, and they were thinking like, damn, like that's going to take forever to change all that, like no, we really don't want to do that. Like, why would you require that? And the CEO was explaining that if you want to work with a credit union, and if you want to have more credit unions as your clients, you cannot have the name Bankr in your software. And that was the reasoning. So there you go. They ended up that, okay, you need to change the name. That's the early life of a fintech, that like you have to bite the bullet and you have to change the name of your whole company, do all the URL changes because your first big client tells you to do that. And then it was one Friday afternoon that those 6 guys, or was it even less than 6 at that time, they were thinking that should we hire a marketing agency think of a good brand and good name, and that was very clear that it's a no-go. They don't have the money or the resources to do that. Well, as a side note, you maybe remember the Hesburger story, what they did with their name. But then they were thinking like, okay, somebody invented that live oak. Like, what is it in Spanish? And Googling it, or maybe they knew Spanish well enough. And there they realized that nCino, that sounds good, but then they had to Google that what nCino, like, are there other hits that you can get on Google with typing nCino? And they discovered that there was this B-level movie, a comedy movie from the early 90s called nCino Man. And they thought that we are going to be the worldwide leader in cloud banking. Of course, they weren't humble guys. They were shooting for the stars or shooting for the moon right from the beginning. And they decided that they cannot be affiliated to some B-level movie. So that's how they ended up sort of dropping the E from the end and changing like how to type the letters. And there you go. That was the story.
Fantastic. It looks like you're the first guest ever to combine the background story of your employer together with the joke and the story. So I love the efficiency that we just established. Yes. So good job. Listeners will definitely appreciate that. And it actually gives us a really nice segue to the next topic that I wanted to talk about. So nCino, I mean, having this ambitious target of being a world leader in cloud banking. But before we get into all of those specifics on your employer, but we could talk a little bit about cloud in general. Mm-hmm. So the cloud obviously has been around for a while, and it's been a hot topic for banking in general. But from your perspective, I mean, working for a cloud-oriented company at the moment, and your background in Salesforce and other companies, technology companies working in this same space. So what does it actually mean when we move to the cloud from a business standpoint? So taking the layman perspective again a little bit here before we get into the deep end. So what is it? I mean, is it just another way of building data centers? And how does it connect to the financial sector, and why is it different perhaps for banks than for any other industry segment?
Very good question, and I'll it requires a little bit longer answer. First of all, I'd like to comment that we are cloud native. We are born in the cloud and developed into the cloud. So it's not only cloud focused, but it's cloud native. Even if it makes any difference, but in the fintech circles, I think it's fair to promote that. For the bank's perspective, it's going to be a big change. Like, my prediction is that by the end of this decade, by year 2030, all of the banks across Nordics are using major of their software out of the cloud, one way or another. And that's my key sort of hypothesis, and also my belief that why I'm working here, and what's the change that I trust here on the business side. For the banks to change to utilizing cloud and using also business critical applications from the cloud, there's a lot of changes, like cultural changes, trust changes, also like, do you trust the cloud provider? How do you do that? And also like, how do you operate? How do you continue your development? So where should I get started? Like, I would say that in the early stages in I would say in last decade, I could see that in the Nordic bankings, when you could hear people talking about cloud, it's like, okay, where is your data stored? And where is your data center? Is it hosted by AWS or is it hosted by Google or where is it? And here, I think here comes a big difference when we talk about software as a service and business applications out of the cloud context, meaning that nCino being a good example in that we develop the solution once. We distribute it over the internet to several clients, and they subscribe to using the software. And then over the time, nCino keeps in the background, keeps on developing the software as well, all the time, every year, two releases every year. And then the clientele also grows. So now we have more than 400 banks and financial institutions around the world using the bank operating system. So there are more and more banks and financial institutions, meaning the credit unions especially, who are providing feedback that, hey, you are very good at this, but could you please have this and these features, or could you change that? So it's continuously developing, but it's all the time serving that to all of the clients at the same time on real time. So think about the efficiency gain and also the lessons learned when there's a bank that haven't renewed their lending solutions since the digitalization, since the 70s, let's say, that it's still based on COBOL somewhere or with old systems. A lot of these bankers are now facing a situation that, hey, we would like to actually renew this, but we don't have experience in buying a software. What we have experience is that we have an army of our own IT people who are very skilled, very experienced. They have been doing it for past couple decades, but actually big chunk of them are already retired. So what to do this? How should we go about it? And there comes actually a different situation that the bank and the software provider, the cloud provider, need to be talking that, hey, what would you need? And then also the cloud provider needs to be able to advocate that hey, these are the best experiences. We have done this over 300 times. So this is what we have learned so far. And the difficulty comes that the banker is not used to listening to a software provider in redesigning their business processes. So I think that's one of the largest things where you need people like me who are then sort of tirelessly talking and explaining it. And obviously it's not same as outsourcing. You're not fully outsourcing it because you are collaborating there. So the bank have their say that, hey, actually we need this and we need to take this let's say Finnish regulations into account. So okay, let's fix it. Let's configure that on the platform. And there's a big change in many of the things, how it used to be done, how it used to be developed and also maintained.
So I'm gonna kind of double click on that topic, because I actually like we mentioned, we met in the Fintech Summit a couple of weeks ago, and I was on a panel discussion there in the Fintech Summit, and one of the questions that I was asked is that how realistic is it really to have this one-size-fits-all, configure everywhere type of approach for banking processes, given the fact that the regulations, the rules, everything is very different country by country. For sure, there's a lot of legacy in terms of thinking that this is the way we've always done it, so we're going to do it, keep on doing it. We're just going to make a digital version of the old thing we did. But the other side of that is also that there are legal requirements and regulation and compliance topics that are different, almost like country per country, sometimes even bank by bank. So how do you kind of navigate in this cloud environment where you want to maintain a stable core and you want to service all your customers from a single code base, if you will? How do you do that? I mean, is it realistic? Can you really do it that way? And what are the kind of key lessons that you need to know when deploying a strategy like that?
So, like I mentioned, it's not complete outsourcing. So we don't do it fully end to end on behalf of the banks. We do it together in collaboration with the bank. So when it comes to the local regulations, we are in tight collaboration, and also we require the bank to work with us. Also with larger and more complex implementations, we obviously have our local SI partners, system integration partners, who then bring that competence. Something that I see as a positive trend is the EBA guidelines. So pan-European or pan-EU guidelines is actually going to harmonize some of the things and some of the regulations. It could be still a long way, as I was mocking the EU already earlier, but that's what I believe, that things, it makes no sense for each and every country's own FSA to reinvent the wheel.
Couldn't agree more. I think this harmonization and standardization of standard features is a trend that must happen in order to kind of get rid of the fragmentation in this and find efficiency in the financial infrastructure in general. But Paul, I mean, what's your view? I mean, you've been working with cloud core banking systems for a while now. What's your view into this topic of configure everywhere or custom develop, and how do you reconcile between these two worlds?
Well, I mean, Ville, you know, I'm an advocate and a strong believer that the future of banking will be dominated by platforms. So I think we're going to head further and further in this way. And as the banks keep being disrupted, the financial industry is being pushed to accelerate its digitization, there becomes a tipping point where developing your own is no longer viable, right? Particularly exactly like Jaakko said there around nCino. nCino continues to develop the software for the benefit of all of the clients. Therefore, you get the benefit of the many, right? I also think that there is a difference between the central core and therefore the core banking versus, for instance, systems of engagements or digital channels or digital banking platforms. And as you get further and further to the core, you're restrained more and more by local regulation, local variations, even between countries. So I think higher up in the stack, where, for instance, nCino is sitting, you can allow a lot more flexibility and a lot more commonality across the regions and the countries and the clients, because it's more about how you engage, and the framework and the regulatory pressures on that are a lot lighter than they are for the core banking platforms. So I think from that perspective, there is a big variation between the stack and the levels of the stack. But I think one of the very interesting discussions when we're talking about cloud and moving towards cloud, one is around operational resiliency, right? There is a big difference for a bank whether they're managing their operational resiliency in-house, on-premise, versus relying on third-party providers in a cloud environment to do that. And one of the things that we're seeing more and more being discussed these days is, as banks start moving more and more towards relying on third parties in a software as a service or as a service capability, if they neglect to actually understand where these platforms are being operated, they might inadvertently end up in a situation where more than 50% or a large proportion of their business critical workloads are sitting on one single cloud platform. And if that cloud platform goes down, it will dramatically impact their operational resiliency. So I think it becomes a lot more complex for banks to manage, again, operational resiliency in a world where they are relying on an ecosystem of providers out there.
Yeah, and we're going to see a lot of regulation coming down for the operational resiliency as well in the European Union very soon, as most or some people might know. But that's a topic for another day. The only thing that I wanted to add there is that there's the oldest joke that we have repeated many times even here in our podcast, which is that the banks always think that there really is no cloud. It's just someone else's computer. So you need to figure out where the computer is. You need to figure out who has access to that computer. And the operational resilience is a great example of how that becomes more and more important, especially in the current turbulent times that we're seeing, even inside Europe right now. But moving on a little bit, I mean, we've been talking about cloud ESG, we've been talking about how the business architecture is changing. We've been kind of hovering around the topic of nCino, and we've been mentioning your company many times, Jaakko, but maybe it's time to fulfill the promise that we gave in the beginning and talk a little bit about more in detail about nCino. First of all, fair warning, we've had a lot of kind of cloud banking providers, cloud native banking providers on the podcast, so our listeners are quite well versed in this space already. But how would you describe how is nCino different perhaps than everybody else? What are the kind of unique selling points that you usually use when you describe nCino and your core values when you develop solutions for your customers?
Thanks, Ville. So I'll start with the punchline that nCino is built by bankers for bankers. So as it was a spin-off of a bank, but also kept on. We keep on hiring people from the banks as well with banking background. So that's one key strength of nCino as a fintech. So nCino was founded. The software was built in late 2011 when the Live Oak Bank in Wilmington, North Carolina, so Michael Jordan's hometown in the South, they were looking to digitalize government-backed SME lending process. And at the time, Live Oak Bank relationship managers, they were traveling around, meeting, for example, farmers and collecting their tax reports on paper, and then going back to home office to type those details down on their systems, and then having the different approval processes, and because it was government-backed lending, also the approval processes with the state and at that time they were looking for software, how to do it in a more smart way. They couldn't find that at that time, so actually they were discussing with Salesforce, and made a deal with Salesforce that they would start implementing the what is called the bank operating system. And the bank operating system means that the bankers are operating their operations on nCino. So primarily for SME lending, loan origination solution, and a productized loan origination solution. So nCino grew in the first year, 2012, signed the subscription contract with 12 different clients, and 3 years later signed the customer number 100. So I would say that it's extremely rapid growth already from the beginning. There was clear need that the banks and credit unions would need such a software. So basically, what you can do on nCino is that you take a loan application of the client, or you type the loan application onto the nCino platform, and you can have the end-to-end loan origination. And then the end means that it is stored in the general ledger or core loan system. So nCino is not a mainframe technology. It's not equipped for that. So there we integrate with a core banking solution, and we have done that tens of different times with different core technologies. And SME lending, then it grew in the continuous product development into more complex corporate lending, and going up all the way up to the CIB business as well. And also as an origination platform can support, for example, cash management product origination similarly. And then a couple of years ago went to the retail space as well for especially mortgages, secured lending, and also consumer lending and even asset finance to some extent. So that's where it is now. nCino has done 3 acquisitions as well, focusing on the AI, for example, optical character recognition for financial statements. So a company's financial statement or tax report can be actually scanned off a paper or the PDF on electronic format, that the software reads it and it distributes all that. So the credit analysts can actually run their projections that what if this business's revenue grows 10%, or if it declines 10% or 20%, what are the different risk factors and all that. So I'm not a credit analyst. That's the most advanced that I'm able to explain it in my layman's terms. But I believe that's pretty much how nCino has been built up, and what is our, so to say, sweet spot. And maybe about the ESG, sort of dropping that mention that on ESG front, which is now hot topic 2022, is that combining all that necessary data from the different data points, from the EU taxonomy, but other available data points as well, in the credit cycle process as well. So it can be per client, it can be per loan, per collateral, or then overlooking at your lending portfolio, that what are the different ESG metrics related there.
One thing that's very often put as an association is the fact that nCino is very tightly coupled with Salesforce. Is there a need to have both platforms?
No. So a bank don't need to have Salesforce as a CRM or customer service solution or marketing solution actually at all. The whole contract for nCino comes from nCino as a turnkey delivery software as a service, and from that standpoint, Salesforce is for us platform as a service. So they are hosting in their data centers all of the nCino data. Obviously, there are the good synergies that if a bank is using Salesforce, quite often those banks are actually very, very keen to explore nCino as well, because they have already learned that how easy it is to configure the platform and use it.
Okay. Excellent. And then final question. I mean, we talked about the local features, and you also talked about the history of nCino coming from the credit unions in the US. Now, as the Nordic representative of nCino, how would you describe the fit to the local market of the nCino cloud solution?
We are well equipped for that. So nCino started our European operations, or EMEA operations, if you want to use the American term for Europe, in London 5 years ago. And now within the 5 years, actually now we have implemented nCino across 11 different European countries, and there's more to come already this year. So I think that now we are more than two new countries per year on average on the growth rate. And obviously with every new client, we need to learn what are their specific requirements, what are their local regulatory requirements that we need to configure that. So there's always the implementation project. You cannot get rid of that. But then again, we have proved it already across quite a lot of Europe that we can do it. Excellent stuff.
And we have a common saying here on the podcast, which is that time flies when you're having fun, and it certainly has today. We're all out of time. We didn't even get a chance to talk about rugby, which I know is a favorite sports of yours, Jaakko, and I was actually looking forward to having some chat about that, but we really need to close it out today because we've covered a lot of ground. I think there's a lot of interesting things for our listeners to digest in this episode. But before we close, Jaakko, how can our listeners get in touch with you, learn more about nCino and the things that you're doing here in the Nordics?
That's very easy. So nCino.com is the easiest way, obviously, to find and submitting there a demo request. Don't be shy about submitting your details. Then my colleague or myself will get in touch with you quite quickly. You can always contact me via LinkedIn. It's very easy. So no problem there. Or even just connecting me for the fun of it, for networking purposes. I'm always fan of that.
Excellent stuff. And I guess they can talk to you about rugby as well if you feel like
rugby. Yes, sustainability definitely. So I'm all up for it. So.
Excellent stuff. So again, thank you, dear listeners. This has been another fantastic episode and a conversation here on our podcast series. And before I let you go today, I have to remind you, as always, to please hit that subscribe button that you see right there on your podcast player or on the YouTube channel where you might be watching this episode. These subscriptions really help in other people finding the podcast who are interested in the fintech space and want to listen to our very, very bad jokes, which was actually a pretty good joke today, but nonetheless. And again, finally, please leave a review, especially if you liked it. And if you didn't like the episode, then what are you doing here? I guess you stopped listening a long time ago already. So you probably liked the episode. Give us a 5-star review, write a comment, a nice comment to us. Again, that will help a lot as well. And with that, I will close the episode today. Thank you very much again. This has been Fintech Daydreaming.
This is Fintech Daydreaming.